The massive ship appeared over Earth without warning. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. A dark structure that blocked out the sun over half of North America. People stopped in the streets and stared upward. Cars crashed. Children cried. The world held its breath. This was not the first time aliens had come to Earth. 6 months ago, smaller ships had arrived with messages of peace and trade. The Galactic Hunting Guild. They called themselves representatives of 200 civilizations spread across the stars. They spoke of opportunities and partnerships, of humanity joining the greater community. Earth's governments had been thrilled. Now those same governments sat in emergency meetings across the planet, listening to the Guild's new demand. The transmission played again on every screen. Commander Zira Khan stood tall on the display, her blue-scaled skin reflecting the light. She had 4 arms and eyes that seemed to look through the camera. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. Earth has been observed and evaluated. Your species shows potential. However, tradition must be honored. Every new species must prove their worth in the Great Hunt. You will send 1 contestant to our tournament. This person will compete against the finest hunters from across the galaxy. Success brings your species respect and favorable trade. Failure brings isolation. You have 1 week to choose. The transmission ended. The world erupted into chaos. In Geneva, the United Earth Council argued for 3 days straight. Military generals wanted to send their best Special Forces soldiers. The Americans suggested a Navy SEAL. Russia proposed a Spetsnaz operative. China offered their elite mountain warfare troops. But there was a problem. Dr. Eric Walsh stood before the council and explained it carefully. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. One of Earth's few xenobiology experts. The rules are clear, he said. No military personnel. No enhanced humans. No cybernetic implants. They want natural hunters in their physical prime. Anyone between 15 and 30 years old who learned to hunt and survive without military training. That's ridiculous, a general from France said. Our soldiers are our best. The Guild doesn't care, Doctor. Walsh replied. They have species that live for 300 years. They have warriors who train from birth. They think our military training is primitive and amusing. They want to see what humans are naturally capable of. Then we send volunteers, someone suggested. Hunters. Trackers. People who grew up in harsh environments. We need someone who can survive, Doctor, Walsh said quietly. Earth is unusual. I've been reading their environmental surveys. Most Guild species evolved on calm worlds. Stable climates. Few predators. They think Earth is like that too. What are you suggesting? Dr. Walsh pulled up a file. There's a boy in Montana, 16 years old. Jake Morrison. He's lived alone in the wilderness for 2 years since his grandfather died. He survives by hunting, trapping, and gathering. No modern tools. No communication. Just him and the forest. Park rangers found him last month during a wellness check. He's skilled, and he's young enough to qualify. The room went silent. You want to send a child? Someone asked. I want to send a survivor from Earth, Dr. Walsh said. They don't understand what that means, but they will. The vote was close. But desperation won. Earth had 1 week, and no better options. They sent a team to find Jake Morrison. Jake was checking his trapline when he heard the helicopter. The sound echoed through the valley, disturbing the morning quiet. He froze, his hand on a snare that held a rabbit. Helicopters meant people. People meant trouble. He considered running deeper into the woods. He had supplies cached in 3 different locations. He could disappear for months. But curiosity held him in place. Maybe they were just tourists. Maybe they would fly past. The helicopter landed in a clearing half a mile from his camp. Jake watched from behind a tree as 6 people climbed out. They wore military uniforms and carried weapons. His stomach dropped. Jake Morrison, a woman's voice called out. She had short brown hair and carried herself like a soldier. We need to talk to you. We're from the United Earth Defense Force. We're not here to hurt you. Jake stayed hidden. "We know you can hear us," the woman continued. "My name is Lieutenant Amy Collins. We have an urgent situation. Please come out." He waited 15 minutes. The soldiers didn't move. Finally, Jake stepped out from the trees, his knife visible at his belt. Lieutenant Collins smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you. We need your help." "Don't need help," Jake said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Earth needs help," Collins replied. "Have you heard about the aliens?" Jake had seen the ships in the sky 2 years ago, before he stopped checking his grandfather's old radio. He shrugged. Collins explained quickly. "The tournament. The demand. The choice." With each word, Jake's face grew paler. "No," he said when she finished. "Find someone else." "There is no one else," Collins said. "You're our best option. I'm 16. The aliens don't care. I'll die." "Maybe," Collins said honestly. "But Earth needs a contestant. If we refuse, they'll cut us off. No trade, no technology, no medicine. We'll be alone out here." Jake backed away. "No. I didn't ask for this. Leave me alone." "Jake, please." "No." His voice cracked. He turned and ran into the forest. They caught him 3 hours later. Jake fought, but 6 trained soldiers were too many. They held him down while a doctor sedated him. As darkness took him, Jake heard Collins say something he would remember later. "I'm sorry, kid. I really am." Jake woke up in a white room. His head ached. He tried the door and found it locked. A camera watched from the corner. He pounded on the door for an hour before anyone came. Dr. Walsh entered with Lieutenant Collins behind him. Jake lunged at the door, but Collins blocked him easily. "Please sit down," Dr. Walsh said calmly. "You have questions. I'll answer them. Let me go," Jake said. "I can't do that. The decision has been made. In 4 days, you'll be transported to the guild vessel. I need to prepare you." Jake sat on the bed, shaking with anger and fear. "Why me?" "Because you survived alone for 2 years in the Montana wilderness. Because you learned from one of the best outdoorsmen in the country. Because you understand nature in a way most people don't." Dr. Walsh sat across from him. "Jake, I won't lie. This is dangerous. The aliens are bigger, stronger, and more experienced than you. But they don't know Earth. They don't understand what it takes to survive here. I'll die in their tournament. Possibly. Or you might surprise them. Earth is what we call a death world. Our planet is harsher than almost anywhere else in the galaxy. Our gravity is stronger. Our diseases are deadlier. Our predators are more dangerous. Humans evolved to survive conditions that would kill most alien species. You just don't know it yet." Jake stared at him. "That doesn't make me special." "It makes every human special," Dr. Walsh said. "The aliens just don't realize it." Over the next 3 days, they tried to prepare him. Collins attempted tactical training, but Jake refused to cooperate. He sat through briefings about alien species with his arms crossed and his mind elsewhere. He ignored weapons, demonstrations, and survival tip sessions. He was going to die anyway. Why pretend otherwise? On the 4th day, they took him to a transport ship. Jake stood in his new clothes, stiff and uncomfortable, looking at the sleek alien shuttle that would take him away from Earth. His hands shook. His breathing came too fast. Collins put a hand on his shoulder. "Jake, I know you're scared. I know you didn't choose this. But you're tougher than you think. Trust your instincts. Remember what your grandfather taught you." Jake didn't answer. He walked up the ramp into the shuttle, his legs barely supporting him. The door closed behind him with a hiss. As the shuttle lifted off, Jake pressed his face against the window, watching Earth shrink below. He had never felt so alone. He had never been so terrified. Somewhere out there, the galaxy's elite hunters waited, and Jake Morrison, a reluctant teenager from Montana, was being sent to face them. He closed his eyes and tried not to cry. The journey to the tournament station took 6 hours. Jake spent most of it alone in a small cabin, trying to control his panic. The walls were smooth and clean. The bed was too hard. Everything smelled wrong, like metal, and something he couldn't identify. When the shuttle finally docked, his stomach was in knots. A guild attendant came to collect him. The creature stood 7 feet tall with gray skin and too many joints in its arms. It gestured for Jake to follow without speaking. Jake walked behind it through corridors filled with aliens. He had never seen anything like them. Some had scales. Others had fur. One group had skin that seemed to shift colors. They were all bigger than him, stronger looking, more confident. They looked at Jake as he passed, and he saw the same expression on every face. Amusement. The attendant brought him to a large chamber where other contestants were gathering. Jake counted 37 beings, not including himself. They stood in groups, talking in languages the translator implant in his ear struggled to interpret. No one approached Jake. He stood alone near the wall, trying to make himself small. "Is that the human?" someone said nearby. The translator made the voice sound flat and emotionless. Jake looked up. A creature covered in brown fur stared at him. It had a muzzle full of sharp teeth and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. It was at least 8 feet tall. "It looks weak," another voice said. This one belonged to something with blue scales and 4 arms. "Why would Earth send a child? Perhaps they have no warriors," the first one replied. "I heard humans are soft. They live on a garden world with no real predators." They laughed and walked away. Jake felt his face burn with shame and anger. But mostly, fear. The ceremony began an hour later. Commander Zira Khan entered the chamber, and all conversation stopped. She moved to the center of the room, her 4 arms gesturing as she spoke. "Welcome, hunters. You represent the finest your species can offer. This tournament has existed for 3,000 years. It tests your skills, your courage, and your will to survive. The rules are simple." She gestured, and a hologram appeared above her head. It showed a planet covered in green and blue, with storms swirling across its surface. You will be dropped on Karveth Prime, a hunting world carefully maintained by the guild. Your goal is to survive and eliminate other contestants. You may hunt the designated prey for points. You may form alliances, though only 5 contestants will complete the tournament. Each of you has been given basic equipment: a blade, a canteen, an emergency beacon. Use the beacon, and you will be extracted immediately, but you will be eliminated from the competition. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. When they landed on Jake, he felt like she could see right through him. The tournament lasts until 5 remain, or until 30 days have passed. Kill or be killed, survive or die. This is the way of the hunt. Do you understand? The room erupted in cheers and roars. Creatures howled and beat their chests. Jake stood silent, his throat tight. One being stepped forward from the crowd. It was massive, with red skin covered in natural armor plates. Spikes ran down its spine. Its eyes glowed yellow. "I am Vortosh," it announced. "Champion of the last 3 tournaments. I will win again. And I will enjoy hunting the human for sport." The crowd laughed. Vortosh turned to stare directly at Jake, a grin showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake looked away, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. An hour later, they were loaded into drop pods. Jake strapped himself in with shaking hands. The pod was small and dark. Through a tiny window, he could see Karveth Prime growing larger below. The planet looked beautiful from space, forests and rivers and mountains. It looked peaceful. The drop began without warning. Jake's stomach lurched as the pod fell toward the surface. He gripped the straps and closed his eyes, trying not to throw up. The pod shook violently. Heat built up around it. Then, suddenly, the descent slowed. Parachutes deployed with a snap, and the pod drifted down. Impact came hard. Jake's head cracked against the padding despite the straps. Pain exploded behind his eyes. The pod door blew open automatically, and fresh air rushed in. Jake sat there for a moment, dizzy and sick. Then he forced himself to move. He crawled out of the pod into a jungle. Trees towered overhead, their leaves dark green and waxy. The air was hot and humid, heavy in his lungs. Strange sounds filled the forest, clicks and whistles and calls that sounded almost like screams. Jake stood on shaky legs and immediately stepped wrong. His ankle twisted on a root hidden under leaves. He went down hard, biting back a cry of pain. When he tried to put weight on it, agony shot up his leg. "No, no, no," he whispered. He sat back against a tree and examined the ankle. Swollen, but probably not broken. Still, he could barely walk. On the first day, in alien jungle, with 37 hunters looking for prey, Jake wanted to give up. He wanted to press the emergency beacon on his belt and go home, but something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was his grandfather's voice in his head saying that Morrison men didn't quit. He took inventory of his supplies. A knife, sharp and well-balanced. A canteen, half full of water. The beacon. His clothes, designed to be durable and weather-resistant. That was it. No rope, no fire starter, no first aid kit. The sun was setting quickly. Jake could see it through the canopy, turning the sky orange and purple. Night would come soon, and he had no idea what hunted in this jungle after dark. He forced himself to move. Using a branch as a crutch, he limped through the undergrowth, looking for shelter. His ankle screamed with every step. Sweat poured down his face. But he kept moving. After 20 minutes, he found a good spot. A cluster of large rocks formed a natural alcove, protected on 3 sides. The ground was relatively dry. Jake cleared the area of debris, checking carefully for anything that might bite or sting. Then he gathered broad leaves from nearby plants. The leaves felt strange, slightly sticky, and thicker than earth plants. But they were waterproof. Jake layered them to create a simple roof over the alcove, weaving them together as best he could. It wouldn't stop a predator, but it would keep him dry if it rained. Night fell completely. The jungle came alive with sounds. Something howled in the distance. Closer, he heard rustling in the bushes. Glowing eyes appeared and disappeared in the darkness. Jake sat with his back against the rock, knife in hand, trying to control his breathing. Rain started an hour later. It fell hard and steady, drumming on his leaf roof. Water ran down the rocks around him. But his shelter held. The rain smelled wrong, slightly acidic. When it touched his skin, it tingled. Jake noticed that the plants around him seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Some kind of bioluminescence, creating an eerie green light throughout the jungle. He could see shapes moving between the trees, things hunting. Things being hunted. He didn't sleep that night. Every sound made him grip his knife tighter. Every shadow looked like a threat. His ankle throbbed, his stomach growled. He was cold despite the humidity. But he survived. When dawn came, pale light filtering through the canopy, Jake was still alive. He crawled out of his shelter, exhausted and sore. His ankle was worse, the swelling spreading up his calf. He needed water soon. Food eventually. Medicine if possible, but more than anything, he needed to stay alive. One night down. How many more to go? Jake looked around the alien jungle, at the strange plants and unfamiliar landscape, and something shifted inside him. The panic was still there. The fear, the desperate wish to be home. But underneath it, something else stirred. The part of him that had survived 2 years alone. The part his grandfather had trained. He was scared. He was hurt. He was alone. But he was still breathing. And as long as he kept breathing, he had a chance. Jake Morrison, reluctant contestant from Earth, began his second day on Carveth Prime. 3 days passed. Jake learned to move through the jungle despite his injured ankle. He learned which plants held clean water in their stems. He learned which creatures were dangerous and which ones ran away. He learned that the acidic rain came every evening, and that most of the alien predators avoided it. What Jake didn't know was that he was doing better than most contestants. The jungle's humidity made it hard to breathe for species from dry worlds. The high gravity exhausted hunters who evolved on lighter planets. The acidic rain burned skin that hadn't developed resistance. Even the simple act of walking through thick undergrowth for hours drained aliens who relied on short bursts of speed rather than endurance. Jake just thought he was barely surviving. But Commander Zira Khan, watching from her monitors on the orbital station, was beginning to worry. The human moved differently than other contestants. He covered ground slowly but constantly. He rested often but briefly. After 3 days, he had traveled farther than hunters, who should have been faster and stronger. On the 4th day, Jake found tracks. He had been looking for water when he noticed the disturbed earth. Something heavy had passed through recently. The tracks led toward a stream he could hear but not see. Jake followed carefully, knife ready. He found the creature at the stream's edge. It was one of the contestants, a being with brown scales and a long tail. It lay in shallow water, breathing hard. Its tongue hung out, swollen and dry. It had removed its equipment and scattered it across the bank. Jake watched from behind a tree. The alien was dying. Dehydration, probably. It had been drinking from the stream. But something was wrong. Maybe the water here was toxic to its species. Maybe it had been drinking too little for too long. Jake knew he should leave. One less contestant meant better odds. The alien might even attack him if given the chance. But watching another being die slowly felt wrong. His grandfather had taught him to respect life, even when hunting. He stepped out from the trees. The alien's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear and confusion. It tried to move but could barely lift its body. "Easy," Jake said quietly, though he knew the alien couldn't understand without its translator nearby. He pointed to the equipment scattered on the bank, then to the alien. He moved slowly, picked up the translator device, and brought it closer. The alien stared at him. "Human," it said weakly. "You should kill me. End it." "No," Jake said. He pointed upstream. "Different water. Better. Come on." He had found a place yesterday where water flowed over specific rocks. The minerals in those rocks seemed to neutralize some of the acidity. It was a 20-minute walk. The alien would never make it alone. Jake helped it stand. The creature was twice his size but so weak it leaned heavily on him. They moved slowly upstream, stopping every few minutes to rest. Jake's ankles screamed in protest, but he kept going. At the better water source, the alien drank deeply. Color returned to its scales. Strength came back to its limbs. It looked at Jake with an expression he couldn't read. "Why?" it asked simply. Jake shrugged. "Seemed right. This is a death tournament. I am your competition." "Yeah, well, I didn't want to be here anyway." The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are either very foolish or very dangerous. I cannot decide which." It gathered its equipment and backed away slowly. "I will not forget this, human. But I will not hunt you either. Good luck." It disappeared into the jungle. Jake sat down by the stream, suddenly exhausted. He had just helped someone who should have been his enemy. His grandfather would have been proud. Dr. Walsh would have called him an idiot. That night, Jake decided to stop hiding. He had been avoiding the designated prey animals, the creatures the guild wanted them to hunt. But he needed to eat real food, not just plants and insects. He needed to prove he belonged here, if only to himself. He tracked a prey animal for 6 hours the next day. It was fast and alert, with 4 legs and sharp horns. Every time Jake got close, it detected him and ran. But Jake didn't give up. He followed its trail, jogging when he could, walking when he had to rest. His ankle was better now, almost healed. Most predators would have given up after an hour. But Jake had learned persistence hunting from his grandfather. Humans could outlast almost any animal. They could jog for hours while prey animals sprinted and exhausted themselves. By late afternoon, the prey creature was stumbling. Jake was tired but could keep going. When it finally collapsed, too exhausted to run anymore, Jake finished it quickly and cleanly. He said a quiet thank you, the way his grandfather taught him. Somewhere on the orbital station, an alert sounded. The human had made his first kill. It had taken him 6 hours of continuous pursuit. No other contestant had hunted that way. 2 more days passed. Jake learned the jungle better. He found good water sources, safe paths, and places to avoid. He began to feel less like prey and more like himself. The fear was still there, but it didn't control him anymore. Then Vortash found him. Jake was checking a snare he had set when he heard the rustling. Too loud to be an animal. Too deliberate to be accidental. He grabbed his knife and moved away from the snare quickly. Vortash stepped out from behind a tree, massive and armored. The champion's yellow eyes fixed on Jake with a look of amusement and hunger. "Human," Vortash said. "I have been tracking you for a day. You are clever, I admit. You move well for prey. But now the hunt ends." Jake backed away slowly. "I don't want to fight you." "Of course you don't. You want to run and hide. But there is nowhere to go." Vortash moved forward. Arms spread. "I will make this quick. You have my respect for lasting this long." Jake kept backing away, his mind racing. He couldn't fight Vortash directly. The alien was 3 times his size, covered in natural armor, and had decades of combat experience. But Jake knew this jungle now. He knew the paths. He knew the dangers. He turned and ran. Vortash roared with laughter and chased after him. But Jake wasn't running in panic. He was leading. The chase lasted 2 hours. Jake led Vortash through the thickest parts of the jungle, where vines grabbed and roots tripped. He led him through areas where the acidic rain had pooled, burning exposed skin. He led him up a steep hillside where the loose soil shifted underfoot. Vortash was faster, but Jake knew the terrain. Every time the alien got close, Jake used the environment to slow him down. He knocked loose hanging vines into Vortash's path. He led him through thorny bushes that caught on armor. He made him climb and jump and work for every meter gained. Finally, Jake reached the place he wanted. A muddy bank overlooking a stream, weakened by days of rain. He could see the cracks in the earth. It would collapse under enough weight. He waited at the edge, breathing hard. Vortash came charging up the slope, confident and angry. Jake stood his ground until the last moment. Then he jumped aside. Vortash's momentum carried him onto the weak ground. The bank collapsed with a wet tearing sound. The alien roared as he slid down into the mud and shallow water below, not hurt, but trapped in sticky mud up to his waist. Jake looked down at him from above. "I told you I didn't want to fight." He disappeared into the jungle before Vortash could respond. Behind him, he heard the champion's rage echoing through the trees. Later, much later, Jake heard the sound of an extraction ship. Vortash had used his emergency beacon. The champion was out. The human was still in. On the orbital station, Commander Ziricon watched the replay for the 3rd time. The human hadn't used strength or speed. He had used patience, knowledge, and the environment itself. He had turned his weakness into an advantage. Lieutenant Collins watched from Earth and allowed herself a small smile. Maybe Jake Morrison had a chance after all. In the jungle, Jake sat in his shelter as rain fell outside. His hands shook from adrenaline. He had survived an encounter with the tournament champion. Not through fighting, but through thinking. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Smart beats strong every time, boy. Remember that." Jake remembered. And the galaxy was starting to notice. 2 weeks into the tournament, Jake Morrison was no longer the scared teenager who had arrived on Carveth Prime. He moved through the jungle with confidence now. His ankle had healed completely. He knew which plants were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. He had mapped the territory in his mind, knowing every water source, every dangerous area, every path through the thick vegetation. He didn't hunt other contestants. That wasn't who he was. But he didn't run anymore either. He had eliminated 3 hunters who attacked him first, using the environment and his growing knowledge to force them into mistakes. Each time, he felt sick afterward. But each time, he survived. The galaxy was watching. News of the human who defeated Vortash had spread across hundreds of worlds. Some found it amusing. Others found it concerning. How could a species unknown to the greater galaxy produce a contestant this capable? On the orbital station, 5 remaining elite hunters gathered in secret. They represented some of the most powerful civilizations in the guild. Each had decades of combat experience. Each had expected an easy victory. Now they faced elimination by a human teenager. "This is unacceptable," said Kresh, a hunter from a warrior culture known throughout the galaxy. His species had won the tournament 17 times in the last century. "The human makes us look weak. He is just one being," said another, a female hunter named Sala with silver skin and sharp claws. "Together, we can corner him." They formed an alliance, something rarely seen in the tournament. When they were dropped back on the planet, they worked as a unit, tracking Jake with combined skills and shared intelligence. Jake knew they were coming. He had seen other contestants working together, something that violated the usual pride of elite hunters. It meant he was considered a serious threat. Part of him felt proud, most of him felt terrified. He tried to evade them. But 5 skilled trackers covered too much ground. They pushed him toward a canyon system, cutting off his escape routes. Jake realized too late that he was being herded like prey. The canyon walls rose, steep and red on both sides. A narrow stream ran through the bottom. There was only one way out, and the 5 hunters blocked it. Jake stood in the canyon, looking up at them as they took positions on the high ground. "Human," Kresh called down. "You have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender, use your beacon, and leave with honor." Jake didn't respond. His mind was racing, analyzing the situation. 5 against 1. High ground versus low. Experienced warriors versus a teenager. Any direct fight would end badly, but his grandfather had taught him to observe everything, and Jake had noticed something the aliens hadn't. He had been in this canyon before. He knew what happened during certain weather conditions. Dark clouds gathered overhead. Jake had learned to read this planet's weather patterns. The afternoon storms were predictable if you knew what to look for. This canyon flooded during heavy rain, the water funneling down from the surrounding hills. He needed time. He needed the storm to arrive, and he needed the hunters to come down into the canyon. "I'm not surrendering," Jake called back. He started walking deeper into the canyon, away from them. The hunters followed, confident in their numbers. They climbed down the walls, moving into the canyon floor. Jake kept walking, checking the sky, watching the clouds build. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Halfway through the canyon, Jake stopped. He had positioned himself near a section of wall where recent erosion had weakened the stone. Loose rocks balanced precariously above. He picked up smaller stones and began throwing them at specific points. "What is he doing?" Sala asked, confused. Jake threw another rock, then another. Part of the wall gave way with a grinding sound. Rocks tumbled down, not enough to hurt the hunters, but enough to block part of the canyon behind them. The first drops of rain fell. Jake smiled grimly. The aliens looked up at the sky, unconcerned. They were used to rain, but this wasn't normal rain. This was the heavy, acidic downpour that came with the afternoon storms. Within minutes, visibility dropped. The rain fell so hard, it was like standing under a waterfall. The aliens' skin began to burn and itch. They covered their eyes, trying to see through the deluge. Jake had prepared for this. He had covered his skin with mud earlier, a crude protection that helped neutralize the acid. He moved through the rain with his eyes barely open, relying on memory and touch. The water level in the canyon began to rise. Streams flowing down from the hills merged into a growing flood. The aliens noticed too late. Water surged around their ankles, then their knees. The current grew stronger. Jake climbed. He had scouted handholds earlier, small ledges and cracks in the canyon wall that could support his weight. He moved up quickly while the hunters struggled in the rising water below. Kresh roared orders, trying to organize a retreat. But the rock slide Jake had triggered blocked the easy path back. They could climb out, but it would take time. Time the flood wasn't giving them. Jake reached a ledge 20 feet up and watched. He didn't need to fight them. The canyon was doing it for him. One by one, the hunters activated their emergency beacons as the water swept them off their feet. Extraction ships appeared through the storm, pulling them to safety. When the rain stopped an hour later, Jake climbed down into the empty canyon. His hands shook. His heart pounded. He had just eliminated 5 elite hunters using nothing but observation, timing, and knowledge of the environment. On the orbital station, Commander Zira Khan stared at her screens in silence. Then she did something she had never done before. She accessed Earth's complete environmental data file. What she read made her blood run cold. Earth's gravity was 1.2 times galactic standard. Its temperature fluctuated wildly, from deadly cold to extreme heat. It had millions of species, many of them predators. Its atmosphere contained high oxygen levels that made humans capable of sustained exertion. Its disease load was catastrophic compared to most worlds. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the harshest documented planets with intelligent life. And humans had evolved there for millions of years. Zira Khan called an emergency meeting. The Galactic Council needed to know what they had stumbled upon. On Earth, Dr. Eric Walsh received a surprising communication. The Guild wanted him to give a presentation about human evolution. They wanted to understand what they were seeing. Dr. Walsh stood before cameras that broadcast to 200 civilizations. He spoke calmly and clearly. Humans evolved on what you would consider an extremely hostile world. Our planet forced us to adapt or die. We developed persistence hunting because we couldn't outrun prey. We evolved endurance because our environment demanded it. We learned to use tools because we lacked natural weapons. Every challenge made us stronger. He pulled up images of Earth's diverse environments. Deserts, jungles, mountains, oceans, ice fields. Humans can survive in nearly any environment. We can run for hours without stopping. We can go days without food and water. We can adapt to new situations quickly. We can solve problems under extreme stress. These aren't special abilities. This is just what it takes to survive on Earth. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The images showed predators that would terrify most sentient species. They showed environmental conditions that would kill most aliens in hours. They showed a world that seemed designed to create survivors. The young man in your tournament is not exceptional by human standards, Dr. Walsh continued. He is simply a human who learned to survive in his natural environment. Earth has 7 billion more like him. Some are stronger. Some are smarter. Some are more skilled. What you're seeing is not the best humanity can offer. It's just the beginning. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, civilizations began to reconsider their understanding of Earth. Trade delegations hurried to revise their proposals. Defense ministers updated their threat assessments. The little planet with the friendly radio signals was suddenly looking very different. In the jungle of Carveth Prime, Jake Morrison sat by a small fire, unaware that he had just changed humanity's place in the galaxy. He was tired. He was lonely. He wanted to go home, but he was still alive, and that was all that mattered. 23 days into the tournament, only 8 contestants remained. The number should have been 5 by now. But the remaining hunters refused to give up. They couldn't accept defeat by a human teenager. Pride and reputation drove them to keep fighting. Jake had changed. The scared boy who arrived on Carveth Prime was gone. In his place was someone harder, more focused. He had learned things about himself he never knew. He could push through pain and exhaustion. He could make difficult decisions quickly. He could survive things that should have killed him. But he was tired. Bone-deep tired. He wanted his grandfather's cabin. He wanted quiet mornings and simple routines. He wanted to be alone without wondering if something was hunting him. The remaining contestants came at him one by one. They tried ambushes. They tried traps. They tried direct attacks. Jake survived each encounter, using the skills he had developed over weeks of constant pressure. But each fight took something from him. Each survival came at a cost. On day 27, only 2 remained: Jake and one other hunter. The final contestant was a being named Throck. From a high-gravity world, similar to Earth, his species had evolved in harsh conditions too. He was 9 feet tall, massively muscled, and covered in thick gray skin that resisted most damage. Throck had watched Jake carefully throughout the tournament. Unlike the others, he didn't underestimate the human. He saw the intelligence, the adaptability, the stubborn refusal to quit. He recognized a fellow survivor. Their confrontation began at dawn. Jake was gathering water when Throck appeared across the stream. Neither attacked immediately. They studied each other. 2 beings who understood what it took to survive. "Human," Throck said, his voice deep and rough. "I have watched you. You fight well for one so young." "I don't want to fight you," Jake replied honestly. "Nor I you. But only one of us can win." Throck crossed the stream slowly. "My world is harsh. Like yours. My people know struggle. I respect what you have done here." "Then we could both use our beacons," Jake suggested. "End it now." "I cannot. My species needs the victory. Our status in the galaxy depends on it." Throck drew his blade. "I will give you a good death, human. You have earned that much." The fight lasted 2 days. Not continuous combat, but an extended hunt, where each tracked and tested the other. They fought in the morning near the stream. Jake used speed and cleverness, but Throck's size and strength were overwhelming. Jake barely escaped, fleeing into the jungle with new cuts on his arms. They fought again that evening in a clearing. Throck cornered Jake, but Jake used fire from burning wood to drive him back. The alien's skin might resist damage, but he still felt heat. Jake disappeared into the smoke. The second day brought more encounters, quick clashes and long pursuits. Both were exhausted. Both were injured. Jake's ribs ached from a heavy blow. Throck limped from a leg wound Jake had managed to inflict. As the sun set on the second day, they faced each other again on a hilltop. Both could barely stand. Blood and sweat covered them. Their weapons were ready, but their bodies were failing. "Why do you fight so hard?" Throck asked, breathing heavily. "Your world sent you here to die. They care nothing for you." "Maybe," Jake said. "But going home means I survived. And survival is what humans do." Throck stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his blade. "I understand," he said quietly. "My people taught me that honor matters more than victory. There is no honor in killing someone who has earned respect." He reached for his emergency beacon. "You fight for survival. I fought for pride. Survival should win." "Wait," Jake said. "Your people need this. My people need to learn the same lesson the galaxy is learning. Underestimating others leads to defeat." Throck activated his beacon. An extraction ship appeared overhead. "Go home, young human. You have won." The ship took Throck away, leaving Jake alone on the hilltop. He stood there, confused and numb. He had won. The tournament was over. He was going home. Jake activated his own beacon. His legs gave out, and he sat down hard. When his extraction ship arrived, Lieutenant Amy Collins was aboard. She helped him to his feet, smiling despite the tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." Jake didn't respond. He couldn't find words. He just wanted to sleep. The journey home took a week. Earth had changed in his absence. The tournament had been broadcast across the planet. Jake's face was on every screen. Everyone knew his name. He was a hero. He hated it. The ship landed to crowds and cameras. Politicians wanted to meet him. Military leaders wanted to study him. Scientists wanted to understand him. Jake stood through the ceremonies and speeches, his mind elsewhere. He answered questions with short sentences. He accepted medals and honors without smiling. Lieutenant Collins stayed close, running interference when the attention became too much. Dr. Walsh visited and apologized for everything. "I never thought you would win," he admitted. I just hoped you would survive long enough to matter." "I did survive," Jake said flatly. "Can I go home now? Can I go home now?" It took 3 more weeks of meetings and debriefings. Earth's status in the galaxy had transformed overnight. Trade agreements arrived daily, defense pacts were offered, technology exchanges were proposed, but there was also fear. Multiple civilizations wanted assurances that Earth wouldn't weaponize its population. Finally, they let Jake leave. He took a transport back to Montana, to the wilderness he knew. Lieutenant Collins came with him, helping him navigate the continued media attention. She had become something like a friend during the chaos. "They want you to train others," Collins said as they hiked toward his old camp. "Start a program for human hunters. Make Earth a power in the guild." "No," Jake said simply. "You could make a difference. Shape humanity's future among the stars. I've done enough." Jake stopped at a familiar clearing. His grandfather's cabin still stood there, weathered but intact. "I just want to be left alone." Collins nodded, understanding. "I'll make sure they leave you alone. You've earned that." She left the next day. Jake spent a week cleaning the cabin and repairing what needed fixing. Then he went back to his old routines, checking trap lines, gathering plants, living quietly in the wilderness. But things were different now. When he looked up at the stars, he knew what was out there. He knew the galaxy was watching Earth. He knew humanity's place among the civilizations had changed forever because of what he had done. In orbit above Earth, Commander Zira Khan prepared her final report for the Galactic Council. She wrote carefully, choosing each word with precision. Earth must be considered a strategic priority. The species designated as human evolved on a Class 12 death world. Every human possesses survival capabilities that exceed the majority of galactic species. They have 7 billion individuals, with genetic diversity suggesting wide variation in ability. The contestant sent to the tournament was described as average by their standards. She paused, reviewing footage of Jake Morrison surviving situations that killed trained alien warriors. Additional analysis suggests humans have barely begun to utilize galactic technology. If they industrialize and unite with access to guild resources, they could rapidly become a dominant force. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic engagement and careful monitoring. Secondary recommendation: do not threaten or provoke Earth unless absolutely necessary. They have already demonstrated what a single reluctant human can accomplish under pressure. She sent the report and looked down at the blue planet below. Somewhere on that world, Jake Morrison was back in his forest, living the quiet life he preferred. The galaxy would never forget him. Earth's future was changed because of him, but Jake himself just wanted to check his trap lines and watch the sunrise over familiar mountains. 3 months later, on a cold morning in Montana, Jake sat on his cabin's porch drinking coffee. His grandfather's old radio played softly, bringing news from a changed world. Humanity was joining the galactic community carefully, slowly, learning from species who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Jake listened without much interest. His part in that story was over. He had done what survival demanded. Nothing more, nothing less. A deer moved through the trees nearby. Jake watched it pass, grateful for the simple moment. He was home. He had survived. And that, finally, was enough. The end.